Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. Gemini Brett here from the School of Earth Astrology. It is Wednesday, miércoles, Mercury's Day at 11:33 a.m. Pacific Time. This means StarryTelling Hour. Very happy you can be here with me, wherever you are coming in from. And whenever, some of you will be watching this at a time that I currently perceive to be the future. The topic today is Venus retrograde. Reborn or reburned or both? What does that even mean? Speaking about burned, my beloved ScorpiAna was going to join me today. And while she's always hot and gives me fever, today she's down with a fever. So it might also be a bit of a shorter trip today. We'll see. I might need to step in with the baby. That's been since 4 a.m. and happy to be with my baby girl as much as mama needs. She had my back when I was sick starting last week, and amazingly, it's kind of gone through the house in a wave. And Dad got it first, and then it was the baby, and now Mama on the other side. So today I was live while driving back from dropping the lad off at school and speaking about this idea that opposites attract actually has something to do with being physically and configured in such a way that we get sick at different times. Anna was speaking with me about that yesterday. But let's talk Venus retrograde. What does this mean? Is it the same as it was 19 months ago and will be 19 months from now? Or to be more precise, Venus is retrograde every 584 days for about 40 days and 40 nights. Typically, the retrograde period of Venus is more often 42 days. So with her synodic cycle, Venus's synodic cycle with the sun, right, the way that Earth sees the dance of Venus and sun in our skies, which is a 584 day or about 19-month thing, 42 days of that 584 day period feature Venus retrograde. Venus pairing to, well, really moving backwards through the constellations that embrace the path of the sun and the signs that emanate from the heart of our planet out towards space. Anna and I were going to have a conversation about this today. And since she cannot be present for that, I think what I'll do is share some of the images I put together for a recent transmission at the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. Very appreciative for Julius Simus for inviting me to share there at the real CIA, the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. We've been every Venus star point or Venus Sun conjunction connecting to offer a collective transmission about the cycle and ways to work with it. And we've been doing that for 8 years now, which is a full Venus star. Because if you take that 584 day period, multiply it by 5, you get 8 Earth years. And 13 Venus years, 8 Earth orbits is almost exactly equal to 13 Venus orbits. And in that period of time, Earth sees Venus kiss the sun. Oh, let me say it this way. The sun sees Venus kiss Earth 5 times. And those kisses create a pentacle about the sun. I think I'm going to leave this like longer term cyclical information then. I will say, however, that if you are turning a multiple of 8 years old, so 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 64, 72, 80, 88, 96, why stop there? 104. Between now and October of 2026, you are in a Venus synodic return process. And it would be a great time to dive deep into the cycle and its meaning. It'd be a great time to receive a reading about that specifically. It's one of my many specialties. I'd love to make my services available to you and to any of you for anything astrological and somewhat otherwise. GeminiBrett.com is the place where you can find me to book session. Just click the sessions tab at the top of the site. Sign the mailing list if you're not on there while you're visiting GeminiBrett.com. I have recently been sharing how I'll be teaching a amazing adventure through the cosmic keys of the heavenly houses at Synchronicity University beginning on Equinox, beginning on March 20th, and it will be 5 consecutive Thursdays. Enrollment's currently closed. We got up to, I think, 125 students or something, which is awesome. I'm so stoked to have like a great packed spacecraft of journey agents to travel with. But we will have another enrollment period open up. I think some of that because I misunderstood how the thing works. And so I was like, hey, some people have missed the opportunity. Can we bring them in? So the way to be notified, stay tuned to this channel. Certainly I'll be letting you know here. So please hit the subscribe button if you're watching this over at YouTube. Like I see one of you writing, oh no, it's closed. It'll open back up. So subscribe to this channel and I'll be announcing it there. Come join the mailing list at my site. I promise you I will not spam you. I rarely send out mailings. I wish I could do it more often, frankly, but it's not my forte. All right. Anyway, that class is going to be amazing and very earth-astrological, where we seek the roots of the rules and the proofs of the astrological equations we use by reconnecting to the medicine of the living sky. Because astrology is so much more than some symbolic language alone. Astrology, my friends, is the poetic breath of nature. Speaking of nature, some wonderful tea, and I just have to fill the cups of some guides here. So Saturn for the form, Venus for the beauty, and Mercury for the transmission. All right. Well, how are you feeling about Venus retrograde? Has every ex you ever dated been blowing up your phone? You know, I've seen it happen. It's been an interesting thing that I'll hear from clients. I've felt that one personally a couple times too. Where they say sometime past loves will show up again. Sometimes that's very much wanted. Sometimes not at all. When wanted in different levels, right? That's kind of up to you. And I know that's a case by case basis, right? But it's an interesting thing you'll often read in kind of typical astrologer transmissions about Venus retrograde. That's assuming that Venus equals relationship and love, and assuming also that retrograde means kind of going back to. we see already in the comment stream here, it's been true for a couple of you. One, it sounds like in the waking world and one in the dream world. Hi, Urania, I see you. And this is an interesting question always. How much are we experiencing a thing because of the planetary alignments, or how much are we expecting to experience a thing because of the planetary alignments and therefore it happens, right? So at least one of you who replied positively to that is definitely a wonderful astrologer yourself, right? Winter, I'm sorry to hear that your aunt passed away and just recently turned 80, right? So that means that your aunt was born with Venus very high and bright as an evening star, as Venus has been. And by the way, friends, this is an important truth of Venus retrograde. Catch her while you can. Let me show you this in a couple different ways astronomically. And then we're going to spend a little more time with Venus archetypally, astrologically. Solar system scope software is a wonderful thing. You can see it up here in the upper right, solar system scope. So you can come play with this wonderful heliocentric or sun-centered image of the solar system at solarsystemscope.com. I highly recommend it. We are looking at a moment in time expressed by a unique sacred geometry of the planets that will never, ever, ever repeat. This one unique moment. Now, I cast it for 11:33 a.m., which is 12 minutes past. So even in those 12 minutes, things have changed a little bit. Maybe I could pull the moon just a little bit this way, the Earth just a little bit that way. So I want you to see where Venus is now. Look, this is not to scale. I can make it look more to scale like this, but it's kind of more exciting if we supersize these planets. And by the way, Venus is actually kind of supersized in Earth's sky now. There is a measurable difference between Venus's size when she's far from Earth versus when she's close by. And by the way, retrograde planet means close by, whether it's the interior decorators like Mercury and Venus, or those whose orbital paths are exterior to ours like Mars. All right. When Mars is retrograde, and Mars just recently stationed direct, retrograde Mars is Earth passing Mars by, right? Well, retrograde Venus is Venus passing Earth. And so part of the power of these 40 days and 40 nights, well, maybe 42, which is the secret to the universe and all things, part of the power might have to do with this proximity. You know, what does it mean when Venus gets so close to us as she does every 584 days, when Venus like this aligns between Earth and the sun? Oops. I want to make sure y'all were looking at the solar system as I was describing it right then, because something got weird. Could someone just write, yes, we could see that on your screen? I sure would appreciate it. It'll give me a moment to pour another cup of tea. Thank you, Mary. All right, well, let's do that again. Yeah, there's something like blocking the clock down here that I find to be quite annoying. Oh, I just found out how to move it. Great. So here we are actually at the equinox, east equinox. So this is the one moment each year when the sun is due east of the center of Earth, not of Los Angeles or New York. Those have a different east in every moment, as does every unique surface location on our planet. but the signs are measured from the center of the Earth, and the Pisces Aries cusp is due east of Earth, which is this way. So we have it oriented so that Earth's North Pole is leaning kind of down towards our screen. That would be the cusp of Cancer. Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, and Aries, right? Well, here's this equinox time, and we have the sun at 0 Aries and Mercury and Venus both a few degrees into Aries. But it's just a few days after this when Venus will align between Earth and Sun. Okay, and her retrograde period continues until she's passed Earth by at some point. Okay, just want you to see, like, from Earth's point of view, this is Venus just like right in the fire of the sun, right? So that's the idea of reburned. How does that work? And then as Venus moves along and stations direct, you're going to see that this kind of angle from Earth's point of view between Venus and Sun, we call it the phase angle, it increases, but not eternally. Like Venus cannot get opposite the Sun like Mars or Jupiter could, because her path is between us and the light, right? And so what happens is Venus kind of reaches a time what we call maximum elongation. The greatest angle that can ever happen here is 48 degrees between Sun and Venus and Earth's sky. And then Venus will actually start closing that gap, and then she'll disappear into the fire of the Sun again. But this time she disappears for a much longer period, anywhere from 2 to 3 months, depending on the cycle and where on Earth you're looking from, where Venus is now just behind the Sun. And so she's buried under the Sun's beam. As if you're familiar with the oldest tale, chiseled into a tablet that we know of anyway, the descent of Inanna into the underworld and her eventual ascent after her death and rebirth in that place. This is what's happening at this time of the Venus cycle. Venus in Sumer was called Inanna. So later in the cycle, there's this time, which will be in January of 2026, that Venus aligns behind the Sun, right? So it's actually, there's 2 types of Venus-Sun conjunctions. This one I was trained to call the exterior conjunction, because Venus is now of exterior to the Sun. It's more commonly called the superior conjunction. Superior meaning above. See how Venus kind of above the Sun? And this is when Venus is very much direct, right? Venus is not passing Earth by, right? And then about 9 months after that time, Venus here will end her time as an evening star, dive into the flames of the Sun again, align between Earth and Sun, and the next cycle begins in the middle of this Venus retrograde period. All right? Now, we'd like to take a lot more time with that. I don't have time to now. I know many of you have studied this. There are many videos you can find on my YouTube page. Actually, search for a playlist called The 13th Flower, and you can find all sorts of Venus cycle stuff. And it's something that I love to teach, especially for those of you who are really deep in your astrological study or working as an astrologist. It's a really powerful cycle to work with. I'm blessed in many ways to have begun my astrological study at the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School with Daniel Gemario and Kaylin Castell. They've since gone different ways. Daniel's at the Turning of the Ages Mystery School now, Totems, and Kaylin at Venus Alchemy. Check them out. Their work is wonderful. And Daniel really was able to first kind of bring this astrological correlation, the astronomical correlation of the death and rebirth of Inanna and what we call the moon gates, though they weren't called them that way. We really came from an astronomer called Clyde Hostetler in this book called Star Trek to Hawaii, which is an amazing, amazing book. Sadly, it does have the obligatory astrology is totally fake line in it that, it seems like astronomers these days have to say, or else they're kicked out of the club, right? Especially if they're getting a little bit mystical, which is certainly happening in that book. But Daniel at that time, which I think it was in the early 90s when he was introduced to that work, also was seeing the research of Project Hindsight. So Robert Hand and Robert Zoller and Robert Schmidt, amongst many, many others, who were translating many of the ancient texts of astrology, and specifically like so-called Western astrology, and getting back to the ancient Hellenistic thread. And seeing these interesting periods for planets, like 20 years for Mercury, or 15 for Mars, and 8 for Venus. And it's like, well, what is this 8-year period for Venus? And the answer is that Venus star, 5 of these cycles in 8 Earth years, where Venus comes between us and the sun and then goes back on the other side, right? 5 times in 8 Earth years, which are 13 Venus years. And if you are into the golden numbers that we find in the pentacles and in our bodies and so many places, you will know that 5 kisses in 8 Earth years, 13 Venus years speaks to us, whispers to us of the mysteries of the golden number, Phi or Phi or Tau, right? 5, 8, 13 being in the Fibonacci sequence 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55. But who is counting? We are. There's so much beauty in this. And Venus has the most harmonic cycle with the sun from our point of view. Or let me say the most consonant cycle. The reason why is Venus's orbital path is the most circular of all of the planets. It's actually quite an oddity. It's not the only oddity about Venus, by the way. Venus spins so slowly that it's almost like she's spinning not at all. The day on Venus rotation is longer than the year, the orbit. It's true for Mercury as well. Venus not only is barely spinning, but that barely spin is in the opposite direction as the rest of the planets. It's an interesting thing as well. Yes. We're going to see another really interesting thing about Venus today in the slides I'll show you, because I've pointed this out before, but I really want to emphasize how important this particular cycle is and encourage those of you, especially in the northern hemisphere, to connect to a rare opportunity to see Venus's transformation at this time from the previous cycle into the coming cycle. There's going to be a very short disappearance, like the shortest you'll see in your life. Well, 8 years later, if you live in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, it's going to be a long disappearance in your sky. And I'll show you why. I think, however, we should start with a glimpse at Venus's archetypal intent in this cycle, and why the way that I'll be sharing it is actually different than the way that I was taught. So let's have a bit of a journey here. Buttons. Just checking in with comments. It sounds like we're all on the same pages. So it's sweet to see you here, and Selena. Many folks joining in. Very much appreciate the present of your presence. All right, buttons. One of those, one of these. All right. Let's do this Earth astrologically, friends. This is something that I create for every Venus cycle. I'm dreaming into a new and improved way to do this that will actually look like a crescent. Venus always looks like a crescent. It's an important thing to know, because Venus either can't be seen at all, that's when she's under the beams of the sun, or can never be more than 48 degrees away from the sun. And so appears to either be not visible at all, or through a telescope, like a tiny sliver crescent, or getting as wide as like the moon is maybe, 4 days after new moon as a waxing young crescent, or 4 days before the following new moon as a waning crone crescent. So what you're looking at here, and I won't go too deep into it, but you can see it starts on March 16th And that's using this 10-degree rule, which I was taught to use for Venus. Her phase angle is 10 degrees. What does that mean? Phase being, or angle being, the distance between Venus and the sun in Earth's zodiac, okay? So you can see at this time, we're looking at Venus at 6.5 degrees Aries, retrograde. She's now retrograde in Aries. And the sun at that time at 26 Pisces. Okay, so there's a 10-degree difference between them. Now, in the Hellenistic tradition, 15 degrees is the number that's used to show a planet under the beams, so close to the sun's light that can't be seen. And you've seen the beams of the sun, right? If you watch the sunset, the sun will set and it's still bright on the horizon, right? That's the sun's beams. And then they will follow the sun down beneath the ground, or the beams of the sun rise before the sun does. Interestingly, in the Hellenistic tradition, the beams of the sun were 15 degrees on either side of the sun. 15 and 15, 30, a sign. This is actually one of the many potential astronomical sources for why we would have 12 signs in this 360-degree zodiac circle. It's the one that's most recently arrived to my awareness. Not through anyone's teachings. Well, yeah, through the teachings of folks like Mercury and the sun. Instant Cart sending me a message about 6th season. A little bit late. Anyway. For Venus, because Venus is so bright, the brightest planet in our sky. Well, traditionally, sun and moon are planetous too, right? So the third, if you want to count the luminaries in the mix, right? I mean, Venus is the most commonly reported UFO. And if you've been seeing Venus as an evening star, meaning in the sunset west over the last couple months, you know what we're talking about. Venus reached her maximum elongation or distance from the sun in January of this year of 2025, about 47, almost 48 degrees. And on Valentine's Day, Venus was at her maximum brightness. Now, it's a kind of interesting thing that these two don't coincide, right? Certainly the moon's maximum phase, which is full, right? The full O, because moon, unlike Venus, can get opposite sun and Earth sky, right? And then fully reflect sunlight back to our eyes. Certainly the moon's phase, like more phase, brighter, right? But that's not true for Venus, because there's really two things participating with the brightness of Venus. One is how far from the sun in our sky. So that's this phase angle or elongation. And again, the maximum, it doesn't achieve this in every cycle. We'll see that she won't in this one to come. 48 degrees. Well, we're kind of seeing that as one of the contributing factors. Contributing, I guess, is how we say that word, factors for Venus's brightness. Well, the other is Venus's proximity. And as we just saw, Venus retrograde means Venus passing Earth by, right? And so the closer to Earth, the literally physically larger in our sky, and that's brighter too, right? So there's a balancing act. And amazingly, I mean, this one, like, wow, maximum elongation, it's just very easy to find the precise moment. It's the moment that Venus's speed through Earth's zodiac is this exact same as the sun's speed, right? And that's one moment as an evening star and one moment as a morning star every cycle. Same is true for Mercury. Finding maximum brightness is more difficult. I personally just rely on Stellarium astronomy software for that. But even then, an issue is I can find Venus's brightest magnitude as an evening star, and it'll be the same number for like 7 days in a row. So I just choose the middle one. Like, because I don't, like, I'm frankly, like, too ignorant to know any better. And so there's folks like Guy Otwell and other astronomers who really study this cycle, and they'll put out dates. But I had originally in my list like this that I made for the cycle that's now coming to its end. I had, I think, indicated February 16th. But then others were saying it was on February 14th. And I was like, let's not miss an opportunity to celebrate Venus's maximum brightness on Valentine's Day, kids. Hallmark if you got them. The whole cycle, the whole star cycle slowly retrogrades through the zodiac by about 2 degrees. So 2 calendar days each year. So if indeed it was February 16th, 2025 for Venus's maximum brightness as an evening star in the sign of Pisces this year, then 8 years from now, it'll be February 14th, 2033. And I'll celebrate that one too. Why not? Okay. So while 15 degrees was the Hellenistic rule for a planet under the beans, Venus is just so bright that she's not going to comply. Especially Aries Venus, y'all. Not only because Aries is Aries, but because of what I'll show you about Venus's orbital situation in that sign for Aries star points in our day and age. The rule that I was taught was 10 degrees of phase. Now I have since learned, and I learned this from Venus 8 years ago, that and in an Aries cycle, because again the Venus star is drawn every 8 years. So if there's an Aries cycle beginning now in 2025, in March of 2025, that means the most recent Aries Venus cycle began in March of 2017. I'm going to get back to why some would suggest that is not quite true. And, I'm fascinated. Like, I met my beloved ScorpiAna in the year of 2017. It was a little later in the year than March. It was around the time of the so-called Great American Eclipse in August of 2017, when I was invited to contribute to a collective of astrologers who were presenting information around that eclipse for Astrology Hub, who Anna worked for their beginning. Since their beginning, I should say. And one thing led to another, and over time, So when our number 8 anniversary in this December, we'll go out and spend some time with Venus. That being said, we won't be able to see Venus at that time. Neither will you. Because, again, Venus, as an evening star, will disappear into the fires of the sun to be reburned, to be reborn, to have kind of the wisdom of the recent learnings of the recent 19-month cycle burned off and composted into rich soil to plant the seeds of this next cycle, right? And the way that I see this, by the way, is that the conjunction here with Venus between Earth and the Sun carries the archetypal intent of the cycle, and that the exterior conjunction, the direct Venus-Sun conjunction, which will happen on January 6, 2026, that's kind of an archetypal initiation for Venus, a death and rebirth. And in this particular cycle, it's an Aries interior conjunction, so I'm going to call this an Aries archetypal intent of this cycle, and then Capricorn for a place of initiation. Now, what might that mean? Well, does anyone want to put some Aries intentions for Venus into the field here? I mean, what is Venus? What is Aries? Like, those are necessary prerequisite questions to this question of what are Aries Venus intentions, yes? And there are many ways to pet the cosmic cat. So I was initially trained to know Venus as the image in all of our charts that describes the way that we express or seek the sacred feminine, and Mars as the sacred masculine. Now, I will say that that worldview was very much challenged by community members and clients during the course of my practice, and seeing different models of relationship that might themselves not necessarily comply in that way. And look, I'm a big fan of kind of the old alchemical approach of the Sun King and Moon Queen and marrying these two, and the heroes Gaimos to birth the inner child, right? Or the one that's complete, and on we go. But I also want to honor and value that many are choosing a non-binary alchemy at this time. And so I found my way back to, I think, older images of Venus just as descriptive of love and arts. And the arts thing is too often missed. So some things that you've entered into the fold here. Thank you for your participation, friends. Winter says self-love. Because Aries, we often teach, is a sign of self. And Venus is a planet of love. So, right? Pretty easy there. But is self-love in any way easy? Right. Melinda writes, love conquers all, but is not a weapon and does not destroy things. Yeah, intriguing. So, knowing the power of spells and knowing that the moon is in Gemini now and carrying the light of Mercury to Venus, perhaps rewriting that sentence so that you don't have to add the disclaimers at the end simply by choosing a word other than conquers, you know? But maybe conquers feels like an Aries word because we often describe Aries to be a way of the warrior, right? So we hear from Olive or from Mary, defend beauty. So that's an intriguing thing as well, right? Because love and beauty are not the same things. Now they might travel together, right? Seeking love with purpose. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that might also come to light in exploring this archetype through the lens, or this cycle through the lens of dual archetype, Aries, Capricorn. Fighting for what one values, cat adds here, right? So Venus also, modern astrology sees in association with the second house of valuables and values and how we value ourselves. So that's interesting. And I just want to check in on Instagram to see if y'all have added anything to the mix. What in Aries is not about fight or conquer or defend? So we did get to hear things like self-purpose is something that was put forward. Maybe that comes from Aries. Thank you for that, Diane. And by the way, this is not me trying to say any of those things that were put forward were wrong. I would suggest they're all right, actually. But I also wonder if in choosing to align with this cycle through defending, fighting for, conquering, though we did hear the conquering, but not through weapons and destruction. if we choose those spells, again, the Gemini moon is currently translating the light of Mercury to Venus as we connect with one another here. With Venus in the 11th, by the way, so how wonderful to do this in community. The 11th, where I'm currently sitting, I honor that many of you are in different places where that has already happened or not yet. Yeah, what might be ways that we choose to connect that might carry a little less strife into the mix? And Laura says here, Aries is the great lover. And I'm wondering if the choice to capitalize the word lover is where Aries comes in. Is Aries does Aries love in a way that is greater than Taurus love, or Gemini, Cancer, or the rest? I'm interested to know more about that. Pioneer, Winter adds to the fold, is a word that's often associated with Aries. Yeah, going first, starting shit. And it doesn't have to be like getting in a fight, starting shit. But, beginnings. There's an adventurous nature. So how about love is bold, brave, courageous? What if we chose to love despite how terrifying it is? What if we chose to burn away the scar tissue in those lines that have slashed the heart in past breaks, and boldly go back into a place where we choose love despite the things that we might typically fear? I was studying some time ago some different images of courage versus bravery. And it really said to me, kind of Leo versus Aries. And interestingly, if we utilize the retrograde Venus conjunction, the time when Venus comes between Earth and Sun, to describe the archetypal intent of a 19-month cycle, a little bit more than 19 months, 584 days. So the last time that Venus came between Earth and Sun was in August of 2023 in the sign of Leo. So we are now transitioning from a Leo cycle, or more specifically, I call it a Leo-Gemini cycle, to an Aries cycle, or to an Aries Capricorn cycle. So from Leo to Aries, so from courage to bravery, which is actually an intriguing thing to consider, because the contrast that I felt most spoke to me is that courage is acting in the face of fear, whereas bravery knows no fear. It doesn't exist, right? It's like before fear. Yeah, Winter, I was thinking of Hendrix as well with bold as love. It's like axis, bold as love, right? Well, here's that axis, maybe, which defines the cardinal directions and the cusp of cardinal signs like Aries, the east point of the world. Mary's with us as well. Cue up some Jimi Hendrix. Speaking of, why not see if Hendrix was born in an Aries Venus cycle? It wouldn't surprise any of us, I don't think. Let me see if I've got a file on Jimmy. I do. Thank you, Astrogold. I mean, maybe that came from personal research. I don't know, but let me get this chart on the screen for you. While I'm here digging around, please let me remind you to like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share the video around. It really helps, and I'd very much appreciate it. Share the love. All right, so Jimmy was born with Venus in the sign of Sagittarius, very close to the sun. Now, in the first sign of his chart, which some might see kind of carrying an Aryan quality, although in the 12th house, which some would see as carrying a Piscean nature, Venus very close to the sun, so very much not visible. And this is direct Venus, retrograde here, indicated by red font. So Jimi Hendrix born with Pluto retrograde in the 8th quadrant house. Hello. Saturn, Uranus retrograde, and Venus very strongly configured to Saturn and to Pluto, and what we call a wedge shape like this. We get a very strong Mercury Sun as well, and the Sun almost exactly at the Mercury Venus midpoint for Jimi Hendrix, which is not in any way surprising, within half a degree. Also at the Mars ascendant midpoint. Pretty cool. Well, I haven't really spent much time with Jimmy's chart. Mercury, Neptune. So Mercury, Uranus, Neptune, Venus, Saturn, Pluto. Intriguing. And the Sun in all of that, right? Moon with Jupiter, we could go on and on. I should never open a chart. They're all endless stories. There's a little bit bold as love can also happen, by the way, with the Scorpio Mars, no doubt. But the way that I'll tune into which cycle Jimmy was born into is I will rewind to the Venus Sun conjunction before birth. And we're going to actually see that Jimmy was born shortly after this Venus Sun conjunction here in the sign of Scorpio. So dig that. Like, Jimmy's got Venus only less than 3 degrees from the Sun. And by the way, when Venus is direct and conjunct the Sun, again, that means Venus, Earth, Sun, Venus behind the Sun. Okay. This is the time when Venus is moving most quickly in her cycle, about 1.25 degrees per minute. So Jimmy was born with very fast Venus, shouldn't surprise anyone. Jimmy was born with very fast Mercury as well, shouldn't surprise anyone. But even with Venus moving so quickly, look at that, she's only separated less than 3 degrees from the Sun. We have to go all the way back here to November 16th, 13 days before his birth, 13 and a half days before, no, 13 and a quarter days before his birth. And Venus, like the Sun moves 11 degrees, Venus moving 14, right? Like they're moving at a very similar speed. Like Venus is, as fast as Venus, 1.25 degrees per day. Well, that's not much faster than the Sun at 1 degree per day, right? So this is why Venus disappears for so long when Venus is direct and conjunct the Sun. Now, some will say that Jimmy was born in a Scorpio Venus cycle, because simply the Venus-Sun conjunction before Jimmy's birth was Scorpio. For me, that is the halfway point of the cycle. The convenient thing about rewinding to the Venus-Sun conjunction before your birth is it's always going to happen within about 9 months of your birth, and so typically will have happened when you are in the womb, What I find to be this, and look, Scorpio Venus makes a lot of sense for Jimmy, doesn't it? Right? So Ariel Gutman, for example, a great practitioner of the Venus mysteries, Julia Seamus, they would see Jimmy in a Scorpio Venus cycle. I'm going to go all the way back about 9 months before this, and we're going to find it was February 2nd, 1942, when Venus came between Earth and Sun in the sign of Aquarius. So I call this an Aquarius Scorpio cycle for Jimi Hendrix. All this because we were looking for potential Aries Venus, because Axis Bold as Love is, a very famous Jimi Hendrix album and song. Now, I'm not going to do it with you here today because I've got some other plans for you. But we should go look at when that record was released and how did that look, and who did Jimmy spend his time with, and things like this. Okay. I'm going to check in with some more of your offerings here. So we get from Linda, Aries is spring, everything bursting into life, Venus, magic, new love. Oh, but in Brazil, Aries is fall. How can we balance that? But I like new love as an image here. And by the way, maybe that's equally relevant if you've been in a relationship for 825 whatever years. The fiery heart. Let me get. Shauna asked, does it matter if Venus is retrograde in that conjunction? Yes, retrograde Venus is Venus between Earth and Sun, direct Venus, Venus on the other side of the Sun. Now, retrograde Venus also disappears into the fire of the Sun, but for a much shorter time because Venus is moving retrograde. So you'll have the opportunity, you star students, to see this now and in the weeks to come. Let's actually just do that together. This is a chart for this moment in Richmond, California. This, by the way, is Venus 10 degrees from the Sun, just reappearing from the flames. You can see this red stuff. This is after sunset, and that's the combustion zone, 8.5 degrees from the Sun. And then you can see the sky chakras, by the way. See the red and the orange and the yellow and the green, the blue stuff's up here. Owl came to watch this rebirth of Venus for me as well. This is Venus returning from the underworld, her first reappearance from after disappearing for 2 to 3 months as an evening star. This in the lower right is the School of Astrology, and Constellations is our community, and we would love for you to join us. There's a class every month. There's actually 4 classes a month at this current state, and it's only $16 a month to join. There are regularly scheduled community discussions where you can share with your peers. It's a wonderful place. I hope you will look into it and join us. You can find the community tab to click to learn more at GeminiBrett.com. All right, so let's go later this eve, and I'm going to let the sun set. Remember, this is the ground beneath our feet. Right, the ascendant, the eastern horizon, the descendant, the western horizon. So this is the setting sun, and we see Venus as an evening star above the ground in the west evening side of the sky after sunset. All right, but let's just go days from then, and we're going to see that Venus, because retrograde and the sun never is just quickly closing the gap between them. So here we are on March 12th, and Venus now 16 degrees from the Sun. And here we are on March 13th, and Venus is only 10 degrees from the Sun. Wait, was that 16? Bad math. 22 and 8, that's 16. It's more like 15 and a half. And then the next day, oh, I looked at the wrong point. The sun's at 24 and Venus is at 7. So 13, 14 degrees. But you can just see how closely they close that gap. Well, eventually Venus gets between us and the sun. That's a retrograde Venus conjunct the sun. All right. Then what's going to happen, and let me just bring them to sunrise, and they're going to rise together, right? Well, we're going to look back to that. But here's the sun rising, all right, and Venus, right? Well, Venus is retrograde, so she's going to go from these early degrees of Aries back into Pisces, while the sun is just moving about 1 degree per day forward through Aries, all right? So just watch how quickly they separate. And here, Venus is now more than 10 degrees from the sun, right? So let me rewind this by some time. This is this solar eclipse, by the way, on March 29th, with Venus 10 degrees, a little bit more from the sun, right? And see how Venus is rising before the sun. I'm just going to go some days from here, and so you can see how quickly, because Venus is retrograde and the sun is always direct, this phase angle between the two opens up. You know, I'm realizing this would be easier to see if we take some beings off the screen like this. All right, so for the shamanic astrology approach, as soon as Venus stations direct, I'm just rewinding by minutes to put the sun down beneath the ground so we can see the light bringer. Venus is a morning star who rises, and then the light follows, okay? After Venus stations direct, the shamanic astrology approach is to look at consecutive conjunctions between Moon and Venus as these times that we call the moon gates. So I'll show you this when we get back to the table. So there's this Moon-Venus conjunction on April 24th, and we call this the crown chakra gate. And about a month later, this would be the third eye chakra gate. All right. And then a month later, the throat chakra, and then the heart chakra, and then the solar plexus, and the sacral chakra, and then the root chakra. All right. And sometimes we will even get an additional Moon-Venus conjunction before Venus is within 10 degrees of the sun and disappearing. That being said, even here 12 degrees away, Venus might not be visible anymore. Now, you'll see I took this to a 0 Aries wheel and just kind of took the horizon away. But just know if that Venus is in a lower degree of a sign or a sign that precedes that sign, she's a morning star. All right. Let me just continue on here. We're going to look at Venus conjunct Sun in Capricorn. So this is Earth, Sun, Venus. All right. And then it'll take some time for these Moon-Venus conjunctions to be seen. Like this one's just too close to the light. All right, let's go to the next month. And here we are, like now Venus has just come back out, just like this. Venus 10 degrees from the sun, but on the evening star side. Let me put this in a quadrant chart, and I'll just rewind to sunset. All right. And just check it out the next day. And you're going to see that Venus is now very slowly separating from the sun. They're moving at similar speeds, okay? So this is like a very long period of Venus slowly climbing in the evening sky until she gets to her maximum height. And about every month, the moon will conjoin Venus like this. All right. I'm oversharing in this. But let me just say it this way. Venus is now ending her reign as the evening star queen. She dives into the flames of the sun to be reborn. Now, I am personally now working with the Venus-Sun conjunction as the rebirth. I was taught to work, rather than with that point, to work with the visible rebirthing of Venus when she's 10 degrees from the sun. The issue is 8 years ago in the same cycle, I saw Venus when she was 1 degree from the sun, and I'll show you why. And then I was like, I don't know. I just had this experience. I will just say for the record that the 10-degree rule for Venus is a very good global average. If the Northern Hemisphere experience offers less time of Venus's disappearance, the Southern Hemisphere experience will be more, and vice versa. The 10-degree rule is a really good global average. And I want to think globally, but act locally and honor my, especially with Aries cycles happening, personal experience. So I've come, as I do with the new moon, work with the no moon, when the moon is conjunct the sun and in the flames of the sun. Planets go into that fire to be reborn. And I see this now at the beginning of the Venus cycle. And it's very important, especially in this particular cycle. And I'll show you that again when we get back to that table. All right. Well, Venus is retrograde. She just very quickly ascends to her morning star height. Even after Venus stations direct, the distance between Venus and sun, the phase angle is increasing. And the reason is Venus was in reverse. She put it in park, right? The sun's just plodding along. So Venus has to put it not only in drive, but then has to accelerate until her speed matches the speed of the sun. Until it does, even though Venus is going forward, the sun's moving forward more quickly. So the phase angle continues to increase. The moment that Venus's speed reaches the speed of the sun, that's the date of maximum elongation. Maximum brightness happens before then, because again, that also considers the contribution of Venus's proximity, and Venus is closest to us retrograde when passing Earth by. You get it? All right. So let me get back. One more thing. So Venus beams up to her height. She stations direct. She's actually still getting higher, but it's at that time when she's intent on chasing the sun down and getting back into the flames for the death and rebirth portion of the cycle. As Venus is slowly descending in the morning sky, every month the moon will conjoin Venus, and typically there's 7 of these moon-Venus conjunctions as Venus is getting lower and lower to the horizon. Then she gets so close to the sun she disappears. That's called heliacal set. And later, after 2 or 3 months, depending on the cycle and where on Earth you're looking from, Venus will then be reborn as an evening star. All right. And very slowly climb in the evening sky. And by the way, it's not just some vertical climb. She does some type of beautiful dance, and a different dance for every cycle. And as she's making her climb, regardless of how she wants to climb the mountain, the moon typically will come and conjoin Venus every month for about 7 months, picking her up from the low combust red zone of the horizon into the bright blue stuff, right? And shamanic astrology approach is to see these moon gates, these moon-Venus conjunctions in correlation with the human chakras, and that's the work. It's really on the way down, and that's Venus as a morning star. We start at the crown. Venus is high, and the moon comes, and we work on clearing the clutter. What's keeping me from connecting to the divine? And I will lens that question through the archetypes of Aries, intention, Capricorn, initiation. Then the third eye, what's keeping me from perceiving truth? Good luck. Excuse me, in this day and age. Right? And then throat, what's keeping me from expression? Right? How am I locked down? The heart, right? How can I clear the clutter of the heart and erase some of that scar tissue? And Venus morning star, we're just clearing into the cup is empty. Then Venus goes into the flames of the sun and disappears for 2 to 3 months, which is this death and rebirth. And when Venus appears as a evening star, we rejoice and we're ready to rebuild. The cup has been emptied, right? And now we're reclaiming the powers of, as the moon conjoins Venus and lifts her up to her evening star glory, right? So with the root chakra, for example, on the way down, I'm releasing fears. There's a lot of work to do there. And then on the way up, reclaiming groundedness. You see what I mean? Okay. Lorelei, I just want to honor what you wrote here. It's beautiful. Aries seems to have an initiative, instinctual sense of spontaneously acting that is both graceful and athletic. Yeah, how about spontaneous, like fiery, instinctual love or art or beauty? Some of these many other images for Venus that have come in. All right. Cool. Let me get back to these slides over here. I'll show you that table again. And you'll get to see actually 2 different lines in bold here. So one is Aries, and that's the conjunction. And that's why I'm calling this an Aries cycle. And the other is Pisces. And this will actually be the first time that, according to the 10-degree rule, Venus is born into a Pisces cycle. So it's sad that I'm going to miss that. And I'm actually not. I will celebrate both of these things. Those who have trained in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, and most have, will consider this to be a Pisces Venus cycle for the whole thing. I've come to honor 2 archetypes, as I shared before. And as I shared before, I've come to align with the conjunction itself. So their 2033, 8 years from now, conjunction will be in the very first degree of Aries, and 8 years from then in 2041, the Venus, retrograde Venus Sun conjunction will be in the sign of Pisces. So regardless, this is a transforming point of the Venus star now, which is a gift. We're coming out of Aries, a sign associated with Venus, to Pisces, traditionally associated with Jupiter, but said to be the place where Venus is exalted. I've spent a lot of time studying that recently, thanks to Venus, and we'll have more opportunity to do that because Venus retrograde in Aries will head back to Pisces. Yes. I'm just seeing that this April 12th position for Venus must be wrong. I need to fix that. because Venus won't move from 28 Pisces to 10 Aries to 26 Pisces. All right. So Venus station direct. I just want to see where that happens. Thanks to Astro Gold for making this easy. And the answer is 24 degrees and 37 minutes Pisces. That's what should be here. The sun's at 21-23 Aries. Almost. It's actually at 23-21 Aries. I should edit this whole thing. I created this when I was super sick. I used to have a software that would just print all of this out for me. Now I have to kind of do it by hand, which is a drag. All right. So then you'll just see these are chakra color coded. All right. And you'll see the phase angles here. Right. So I'll be speaking about this more along the way. And again, if you want to learn much more about this cycle, the best way for us to do it is connect it to your chart, connect you to this current cycle. So please, set up a session for me, GeminiBrett.com, to do that and ask me to focus on Venus with you. Maybe if you're on my mailing list, I'll send out a opportunity for a discounted reading for Venus cycles only. So please get on my mailing list at GeminiBrett.com. All right, so then we get down, we empty the cup, we're coming down, we're clearing through these chakras. Moon aligns with Venus every month. We set our intention, in this case in September, to clear out the sacral chakra, and then in October, the root chakra. This is that 8th Moon-Venus conjunction that may or may not be visible because Venus is only 12 degrees from the sun at that time. And then Venus within 10 degrees has her set. There's the exterior conjunction, the shamanic initiation, when Venus is back behind the sun. That happens in Capricorn this cycle, and then she comes back up. And then every month the moon will meet her there, starting by reclaiming the gifts of the root chakra, the sacral chakra, and on we go until we retrieve the crown. All right. So I'm going to clean this up and I'll be showing it at times along the way. If you're on my mailing list, I will send out the finalized version. All right. So again, GeminiBrett.com to get there. Now, let me just put that away and we'll talk about this. If I'm, the way that I will be practicing, there's nothing I was about to say. If I'm right about this, who cares? The way that I will be practicing is that this bold love, this new love, this commitment to love, this willingness to go in. And Anna and I will be married very likely during this cycle. I mean, obviously that's a very deep commitment, right? So Aries, and this is something that didn't really come in so much, a little bit. But one of the ways I really appreciate my first teacher, Daniel Gemario, teaching Aries is it just goes all in. It's like the chips are all in. This is what I'm doing. That's the mountain I'm summiting. It's like, and as I was saying before, this idea of bravery, it's not like acting in the face of fear. That's courage. Bravery, you just go, right? And oftentimes that's happening through an external stimulus, right? All right. So there's something also in Aries that individuates, that does it in a unique, new and personal way, right? So it's okay if you love in a way that's different than you were taught to by Walt Disney. Sorry, Walt Disney wouldn't have done that to you. Well, maybe he would have. Anyway, by Disney. Let's leave the Walt out of it. Or by your parents, or by the culture. It's okay if the way you rock and roll sounds a little bit different than the stuff that's approved of and sold, So how will you live artistically, creatively? That carries through in so many regards. I think the Leo Venus cycle, that was my main thing, like living life as art. But there's a boldness here, and life is an art form. And love is certainly an art form. And how can we bring more love to life and more life to love? Well, what about Capricorn as a place of death and rebirth? Well, you might have to kill your culture if you want to stay committed to fully investing in love life and love the life you live and live the life you love. Cool in the gang. But I really see the place of initiation as a reminder of not something that you are doing away with, but being realigned through. So Aries Capricorn, there's so much in the hero's journey here, right? Of going out into the special world in the wilderness and going in the initiation in the cave, which really speaks to the cycle, right? Finding the elixir. Well, then you bring it back to the tribe, right? So even as we individuate, that's something in claiming our own personal strength. It doesn't mean it wants to be tribeless or even purposeless. So I'll go back to what Diane said, which I really appreciated, which was that we want purposeful love with a purpose. And she was speaking about that in regards to her natal chart. She wrote, my Venus Aries is all about seeking love with purpose. I would say an Aries Capricorn cycle, it's about that first loving and then aligning that love with purpose, foundation, even tradition, right? But traditions sometimes need to be realigned, and that might be part of this cycle too. All right. I want to honor my commitment to my beloved and my baby, and we still have much to do here, but we're going to kind of passionately move through. Now, I used to use She-Ra as like a joke for what Venus and Aries was, and really kind of poking fun at mathematical astrologers who like, oh, you just take Venus is love and Aries is warrior, and you put them together. I was like, oh, love warrior is She-Ra, who I'm dating myself, but that's the sister of He-Man. Then I realized it's totally right. I watched some She-Ra again for the first time in decades. I used to watch some She-Ra. Anyway, and I was like, damn, look at like the 5-pointed star, the hilt of her amazing sword. And she rides around on this Pegasus. Well, you know where the Venus, and we'll see a slide of this, the Venus Sun conjunction in Aries happens in our day and age. Aries is a sign, not a constellation. The ram is the constellation, okay? But you'll see that it's in the head of the fish, but aligned with the Pegasus or Pegacorn Swifty, okay? Well, She-Ra also has healing hands. And as I said before, this Aries star point, either now, if you're playing by the 10-degree heliacal rise, Venus visibly reborn, globally rule, or in 16 years from now, if you're working with the Venus-Sun conjunction, or both, it's after more than a century of Venus-Sun conjunctions in Aries, we're moving to Pisces, right? So we're like She-Ra's healing hand. So I love that. All right. It's all about She-Ra. Well, many invoke Wonder Woman here. And by the way, She-Ra was first launched in a Venus Aries cycle on TV. I learned recently it was redone. I paid for it, but didn't watch it yet. Sounds like a video or like a course. But anyway, it was redone in a Venus Aries cycle. So Wonder Woman came out in a Venus Aries cycle. Check out that 5-pointed star. Wonder Woman movie, like the first of the modern movies that came out, Venus Aries cycle. Now she lost the 5-pointed stars here, which looks like they've lost their astrology, yo. But so I'll just invoke the Wonder Woman from my youth. And there you go. Stars all over the place. But my first girlfriend looked like this. You know, she didn't know she was my girlfriend. And I was a very, very young man. But I'm talking about Leia. And sadly, I cannot play this next bit for you. Oh, but there's subtitles. So let's just go here. A woman's place is in the resistance. I love this poster that's on a neighbor's lawn over here. And it's interesting to consider the truth that the recent Aries Venus cycles, the one that's beginning now in 2025 and the last one in 2017, both coincided with Donald Trump in the White House. Obviously, 8 years ago, there were all sorts of marches, right, specifically about women's rights and such. And, you know, if a woman's place is in the resistance, I'm not one to say a woman's place is anywhere, all right? Well, what are you going to resist? Do you need something to push back against? This is the external stimulus I was speaking about before. Now, this is me kind of showing Venus and Venus cycles globally as an image of the archetypal ascent of the global guidus, as I like to say, right? Is there something kind of the collective sacred feminine energy? Mary says this poster is the best. I've seen posters that use, instead of resistance, the rebellion, which would be more appropriate for Star Wars folks like myself, or the revolution, right? Well, you can feel some Aries in all of that. You can feel some Uranus there too. And by the way, Venus is parallel Uranus in Leia's chart and Carrie Fisher's chart, I believe. So the sound sadly won't come through. It's a StreamYard thing. But fortunately, this is subtitled. I'm going to let this play.
What appealed to me was that George Lucas, who wrote it and also directed it, didn't want a damsel in distress, didn't want your stereotypical princess, sort of a victim, frightened, incapable of dealing with a situation without the guys. He wanted a fighter. He wanted someone who was independent.
He wanted a fighter. He wanted somebody who was independent. Where have we heard that before? Like in the comment thread about, an Aries Venus cycle, right? Well, check out the chart for Star Wars. You're supposed to say Star Wars Part 4 or Star Wars A New Hope. Star Wars, y'all. Aries Venus conjunct Mars, right? This is the first release of that film. It's New York City, May 25th, 77, 10:45 a.m. A Leo rising chart. And look, I'm not going to go and show you all of the research I did around this and of the charts of Carrie Fisher and George Lucas and Harrison Ford, and some really intriguing things there. And I get into some of the mix around
playing the role of Princess
astrological parallels. That was my contribution to the recent Venus Star Point gathering at the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. I think what I'll do instead is just bring you over to the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. If you go there, where are you? How do I bring you there with me? Come with me. Join me on the World Wide Web. At CosmicIntelligenceAgency.com, you will see many, many, many amazing things. I'm happy to have been an agent in the true CIA for many years now. Right here, Venus Star Aries. You can still purchase the recordings of this. And they were wonderful. A preview thing, too. Got a little heated, by the way, because Yulia started by asking us what's going on in the States right now. Anyway, there's also a place where on Cosmic Intelligence Agency, you should also be able to link to kind of the great Venus work, where there are now 8 years worth or 10 webinars worth of Venus things. Here's the most recent one we did just before this weekend when we record the Aries point, Leo point. But somewhere you can buy them as a package. I will leave you up to your own meanderings. Okay, you can contact the Cosmic Intelligence Agency if you want to learn how to do that. And so I was too sick to do what I had been planning to do. And so I was inspired by A Woman's Place is in the Resistance to go look at Carrie Fisher's, that's the actress who played Leia's chart, and George Lucas's chart, and the Star Wars chart, and the relationship between Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford's chart. And it was like just found amazing magic as we do. It was cool. This is what I want to show you today. I've flashed this on the screen before. It's a very important cycle that we're in. Oh, wait, let me do this in a different way. Yeah, buttons. Okay, so here is the coming conjunction. Okay, and why do I have this cast for Split Lake, Canada? Because it's 56 degrees north of Earth's equator, which is going to be important for the magic I'm about to show you, and because the Sun and Venus have just set. Oh, wait a second. The Sun has set? But Venus has not yet. I'm showing Venus with a positive altitude here. Okay, the sun 4 degrees beneath the horizon, Venus still half a degree above the horizon. What? Even though they're exactly conjunct? How does that work? Well, let's take a look at it first and look at Venus, Shira, with Swifty, the Pegasus. Okay. The head of the fish in our day and age, tropical Aries, the east point, is aligned to the constellational fish. And we'll say that's why we remain in the age of Pisces, and that's a long tail for a different time. All right. But importantly, just know signs are not constellations. They're both very important things. All right. Well, look at how far Venus is from the sun. What? Because when we show them in a chart, we're just looking at longitude, right? So this say they're both at 239 Aries. But Venus is not tied to the sun's path. So latitude matters as well. All right. Or some will see this in declination, which is a measurement from Earth's equator. So you'll see the sun's declination here at 1 degrees north of Earth's equator. Well, Venus is almost 9 degrees north of equator. Or the latitude, the sun's latitude is always 0. That's an angular measurement from the ecliptic. That's the sun's path. Venus isn't tied to the sun's path. Did you know Venus can separate by 8.5 degrees? Yes, she can. And I actually wonder if this is why combustion is said to be 8.5 degrees. Venus and Mercury both can separate from the sun's path by that amount of latitude. Okay. So even though they're conjunct by longitude, think of that as like the x-axis. They're 8.5 degrees away by celestial latitude. You can think of that as like the y-axis. Okay. Terranian Librarian offers R.A. Salvatore readers here. Can't not think of Caddy Bree. Pardon my ignorance, but is that Katniss from like the Hunger Games? Because that would be another interesting archetype to explore for sure. And, you know, knowing that Katniss has this purpose, right? Leia has this purpose. And sometimes that's something to defend. She-Ra does as well. Wonder Woman too. All right. So what I'm showing here is that this far north of the equator, just based on how this sign sets, folks actually might be able to see Venus in the moment that she's conjunct the sun. Isn't that wild? All right. And we've got to be pretty far north of Earth's equator in this particular cycle for that to go down. And I chose Split Lake, Canada, just because it's in the right place where during the exact conjunction, the sun is now 4 degrees beneath the ground. Venus is going to be super bright, kind of, you know, reflecting sunlight. I mean, Venus is 8.5 degrees away from the sun in phase angle. It says 0 degrees on my chart, but, you know, as far as how her crescent goes, like, you know, she's 8.5 degrees away. All right. I'm going to now just dim the atmosphere and we're going to zoom out and you're going to see Venus's orbital path here. I'm tracing it. It's in green. All right. So unlike lunar nodes, which are where the moon's path crosses the sun's path, Venus's nodes are not opposite one another. They can't be. The extremes are only ever 48 degrees away from the sun, right? So the whole thing could ever only be 92 degrees. And I wonder if it's ever more than 90. I'm not sure. Well, look at these nodes on the chart. The nodes are where Venus's path crosses the sun's path. All right. So it's kind of a weird thing because we're so used to lunar nodes. But so I show you this in a chart. We're going to see that the nodes are not opposite in any way. If Venus is not at a node, she's very far from her nodes. That's why she's very far from the sun's path. The nodes are where her path intersects the sun's path. You know, Venus at a node would be Venus on the ecliptic or on the sun's path. Venus away from the nodes means Venus not on the ecliptic. And this is the extreme, as you can very kind of clearly see here in the split lake image. Well, on the left, now we have an image in the same moment in Chelyabinsk, Russia. Where I believe in this moment of the conjunction, while folks in Split Lake are watching Venus in the moment of the conjunction as an evening star, here in Chelyabinsk, Venus as a morning star in the exact same moment. right? And this is why I have shifted from using the 10-degree rule to define the archetypal intention to using this conjunction. So here's the nodes of Venus, by the way. And let's see how far apart they are. Interestingly, in this particular case, let me make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah, they're pretty close to a quintile. Why is it interesting? Because a quintile is a fifth of a zodiac, and that draws the 5-pointed star, which is what Sun and Venus do in our sky. I wonder, I can't wait to play more of that another time. Intrigued. All right, anyway, here's a trippy chart. The sun is not yet risen, but Venus has. Like, look at how far she is from the horizon. Charts are wonderful models of the sky, but they don't tell it all, especially when we get far from the equator, like these places. Chelyabinsk is 55 degrees north of Earth's equator. But you can see here, Venus has a positive altitude, right? There's actually more separation. The sun's almost 7 degrees beneath the horizon, and Venus 1.5 degrees above. So I wish I knew somebody there to take a photograph of this for me. I do. Friend of a friend in Finland. So I'm hoping to ask to get a glimpse. And someone else is driving up somewhere near Split Lake. Well, here's just 2 charts for Split Lake on the same day. This one on the right, we've been seeing the conjunction itself. But that morning and the next morning, I'm sure Venus will be seen as a morning star. Look, here's Sun 4 degrees beneath the horizon and Venus 4.5 degrees above the horizon. All right. So what is it to see Venus as a morning star and as an evening star in the same day on the day of the conjunction? And the answer is it's breaking the rules. And you know who should? Aries should. All right. I mean, Aquarius should. I always love to say Capricorn is the rules of the game. And if the rules are good, then Aquarius innovates and adds and expands the game into new, magical, brilliant space. But if the rules are no good, then the right thing to do, breaking broken rules is the right thing to do. Well, we don't have to break rules to break out and do something new. You know what I mean? That's the truth of innovation. It doesn't have to necessarily be a rebellion or a resistance. Right? And sometimes that's necessary, but just pioneering something new, invention, And what I would say most importantly at this time for all of us, please resist the things that are telling you not to love. And if anything's telling you to hate, ding, 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 the answer is that's telling you not to love. If you're seeing anyone as public enemy number 1, why? Is that working for you? All right. And I'm not saying I love the guy, not in any way. But please don't allow yourself to be deceived into this is light and this is dark and this is good and this is evil. Because sometimes all of that is true. And if that's your truth, then that's your truth, right? But some of the things that we are being told and shown to keep us divide and conquer, right? Is not love at all. Bring her in, baby. Anna, bring her in. Come here, my girl. Come here. Go to bed. Look at this. This is the resistance, friends. And the beauty and all those other things too, huh? Yeah. It's a Gemini moon swimming through your Gemini and everything. Mercury and Venus, in line with your Jupiter right now. We're going to go out for our 4th walk or what? This is Maya, if y'all haven't met. We were both born into the Venus cycle that's just now ending. So we saw the most recent Moon-Venus conjunction, celebrate that together as we have the ones before. We were like, And though this Aries cycle to come is not the one to which we were born, we will certainly celebrate it as well, because, my friends, we are all the cycles, we're all the signs, and we are all connected, and we should do that in love and not in hate, right? It's the hatred that leads to war. So anyway, I hope that we will let our hearts do the thinking for a little while, and we have a great opportunity now to be reborn in that way. You got anything else to share about it? To my mind, the depth. To my mind, the depth. Mwah. Looks like he ate something. I love you. All right. Love you all. Thank you so much for joining. By the way, this is what I do for my job. I got a baby. So if you want to support the work, we'd love it if you did. You will find all sorts of donate buttons lurking around GeminiBrett.com. Again, there you will find a sessions button if you'd like to book a reading with me. I would love to take you through your own Venus signatures and hear you take me through that. And I practice ancient astrology and modern astrology and blend these things. Diane, that's sweet of you to say that my work and Anna's work as a practicing astrologer as well complement one another. This is the most wonderful thing perhaps to say. While you're here, please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. It really does help. All right. Thanks so much, friends. The present of your presence is such a wonderful gift. See you in space. May we all love boldly.